Imagine walking into a bank wearing a simple red hat and suddenly becoming the center of attention. For all the wrong reasons. What happens when assumptions spiral out of control and the person everyone judged turns out to be the one holding all the power? Stay tuned, because this story will challenge everything you think you know about appearances, respect, and second chances. Never underestimate simplicity. Sometimes, the most unassuming people hold the greatest strength. Comments below where you're watching from, and if you like and love our story, kindly subscribe our channel. Life, inspirational, and motivational tales that explore themes of love, unity, and patriotism. Stay with us always for interesting stories. Thanks. Let's start the story. The air inside the bank was alive with the quiet hum of activity. Customers shuffled between counters, the faint beeping of card readers punctuating the murmur of polite conversations. The pristine marble floors gleamed under the bright lights, and the faint scent of polished wood filled the space. It was a place where wealth and prestige were as much a part of the decor as the leather armchairs in the waiting area. Ethan Blake stepped into the lobby, his presence commanding attention without effort. In his mid-40s, Ethan carried himself with the quiet confidence of someone who had achieved more than most could dream of. He wore a casual yet sharp outfit, but it wasn't his attire that caught the eye. Sitting atop his neatly combed hair was a bright red MAGA hat emblazoned with the bold letters, "Make America Great Again." As Ethan moved toward the teller line, his expression was calm and focused. He greeted a passing customer with a nod and took his place in line, pulling out a small notebook to review a few notes while he waited. The hat was unmissable, standing out like a beacon against the polished backdrop of the bank. Across the lobby, Karen Whitfield, the middle-aged bank manager with a sharp gaze and an equally sharp tongue, caught sight of him. Her cheerful conversation with a colleague faltered mid-sentence, her eyes locked on the hat, her expression hardening into one of visible disdain. She had always prided herself on maintaining an atmosphere of inclusivity and decorum in her bank, and to her, that hat was a blatant affront to those values. Without a moment's hesitation, Karen made her way toward Ethan. Her heels clicked against the marble floor, each step a declaration of her mounting indignation. Stopping a few feet from him, she crossed her arms and cleared her throat loudly enough to draw the attention of those nearby. "Excuse me," Karen said, her tone cold and clipped. Ethan looked up from his notes, meeting her sharp gaze with a calm demeanor. "Yes, can I help you?" he replied, his voice steady and polite. Karen's eyes flicked to the hat, then back to him. "I'm not sure if you're aware, but this is a professional establishment. Your choice of attire is highly inappropriate and, frankly, offensive." Ethan's brows raised slightly, though his expression remained neutral. "It's just a hat," he said simply. "It reflects my beliefs, but I'm not here to make a statement or disturb anyone. I'm just here to handle some banking." Karen's lips tightened. "That may be how you see it, but that hat represents divisive and offensive ideas to many. It's creating a disturbance, and I can't allow that here." The surrounding customers, previously preoccupied with their own transactions, began to take notice. Murmurs rippled through the line as eyes darted between Ethan and Karen. Ethan glanced around briefly before returning his gaze to Karen. "I am sorry if it bothers you or anyone else," he said calmly, "but I have no intention of causing any disturbance. I'd just like to finish my business here." Karen's patience had already worn thin. "That's not the point. If you won't remove it, I'll have to ask you to leave." Ethan opened his mouth to respond, but before he could, Karen turned sharply and gestured to a nearby security guard. The guard, a young man with a hesitant expression, approached quickly, his eyes darting nervously between Karen and Ethan. Karen spoke firmly, her voice carrying across the room. This gentleman refuses to comply with our request to maintain a professional environment. Please escort him out." The guard looked at Ethan, who remained composed despite the mounting tension. The scene had drawn the attention of nearly everyone in the lobby, their whispers and side glances adding to the charged atmosphere. Ethan sighed softly, meeting the guard's uncertain gaze. "I don't believe I've done anything wrong," he said, his tone steady but edged with resolve. "I'm a customer, just like everyone else here." The guard hesitated, clearly unsure of how to proceed. Karen's expression, however, was resolute. She stood with her arms crossed, waiting for Ethan to comply, or for security to enforce her demand. The audience, both in the lobby and beyond, couldn't help but feel for Ethan. His calm dignity in the face of public judgment only highlighted the unfairness of the situation. As the scene hung in tense silence, one question lingered in the air. Who was this man, and how would he respond to such unwarranted treatment? The tension in the room was palpable, a silent testament to the power of assumptions. Karen's swift judgment of Ethan had not been based on his actions or words, but on the bright red hat perched on his head. For her, the MAGA hat symbolized a set of values and beliefs she found deeply offensive, and without a second thought, she had decided that anyone wearing it must embody those same ideas. This moment was not unique to the bank or to Karen and Ethan. It was a reflection of the broader world, where symbols had become proxies for identity and division. The MAGA hat, like so many other symbols, carried weight far beyond its physical presence. To some, it was a badge of patriotism and pride. To others, it was a banner of exclusion and intolerance. And in this instance, Karen had allowed that weight to cloud her perception. Ethan, for his part, understood the controversy surrounding the hat. He knew it would draw attention, possibly even criticism, but he chose to wear it because it represented his belief in resilience and optimism. For him, the hat was a reminder of personal values, not a weapon to provoke or antagonize. Yet here he was, thrust into a conflict not of his making, forced to defend his right to exist in the same space as everyone else. Karen's reaction was not born of malice, but of the assumptions she carried. She saw the hat and immediately connected it to stories, experiences, and rhetoric that had shaped her understanding of what it meant. In her mind, she was standing up for what was right, protecting the inclusive environment she worked hard to foster. But in doing so, she had overlooked the fundamental truth that actions speak louder than symbols. The surrounding customers, initially silent observers, began to whisper among themselves. Some nodded in agreement with Karen's stance, while others frowned, uncomfortable with how quickly the situation had escalated. Among them were those who shared Karen's disdain for the hat, but questioned whether it justified her treatment of Ethan. This scene, unfolding in real time, mirrored countless interactions in workplaces, schools, and public spaces across the country. People judged each other not by their words or deeds, but by the symbols they carried, the labels they wore. And in that judgment, they often failed to see the person behind the symbol. The conflict between Karen and Ethan was a microcosm of this broader societal divide. It wasn't about the hat itself, but what it represented to each of them. For Karen, it was a threat to the inclusive values she cherished. For Ethan, it was a harmless expression of his beliefs. Their inability to see beyond their own perspectives had led to an unnecessary clash. Yet within this conflict lay the seeds of resolution. Ethan's calm demeanor, his refusal to respond with anger or indignation, forced Karen to confront her own assumptions. And Karen's passionate reaction, while misguided, highlighted the deep-seated emotions and fears that often drove such encounters. The lesson was clear: assumptions, while easy and convenient, often lead to misunderstanding and conflict. The real challenge was to pause, to ask questions, to seek understanding before rushing to judgment. It was a lesson that both Karen and Ethan would come to embrace, though not without difficulty. And in their eventual resolution, they would find a shared humanity that transcended the symbols and labels that had initially divided them. The sleek, modern interior of the bank was bustling with its usual rhythm. Customers filled the spacious lobby, their chatter mingling with the rhythmic tapping of keyboards and the occasional ring of phones. Sunlight streamed through the high glass windows, reflecting off the polished floors and lending the space an air of elegance and calm efficiency. Ethan Blake walked through the glass doors with his usual confident stride. Dressed in a neatly pressed button-down shirt and dark jeans, he looked casual yet polished, but it wasn't his attire that caught the eye of those he passed. Perched proudly on his head was a bright red MAGA hat, the bold lettering, "Make America Great Again," unmistakable. It was a simple accessory, yet its presence was enough to shift the energy in the room. Karen Whitfield, the bank manager, stood near the customer service desk, exchanging pleasantries with a colleague. Her keen eyes scanned the lobby as they always did, ensuring everything was running smoothly. When her gaze landed on Ethan, the conversation faltered. Her smile faded, replaced by a look of displeasure. The hat, so prominently displayed, seemed to ignite something within her. She leaned toward her colleague, her voice lowered but sharp. "Can you believe that? Wearing something like that? Here? Completely unprofessional," she muttered, her tone dripping with disdain. Ethan, oblivious to the growing tension, stepped into the line for the teller. He glanced at his phone briefly, then struck up a polite conversation with the older gentleman in front of him. His demeanor was calm, friendly, and utterly unaware of the storm brewing just a few feet away. Karen couldn't let it go. The sight of that hat, to her, was a blatant affront to the inclusive and respectful environment she prided herself on maintaining. She squared her shoulders, adjusted her blazer, and made her way toward him, her heels clicking purposefully against the tiled floor. "Excuse me," she said sharply, her voice cutting through the ambient noise. Ethan turned toward her, his expression neutral but attentive. "Yes, can I help you?" he asked, his tone polite. Karen's eyes flicked to the hat, then back to him. "I'm sorry, but I have to ask, do you really think it's appropriate to wear something like that in here?" Ethan raised an eyebrow, momentarily puzzled. It's just a hat," he replied simply. "I'm here to handle some banking, not to make a statement." Karen crossed her arms, her disapproval evident. "That hat represents division and intolerance. This is a professional establishment, and I can't allow it to disrupt the environment." Ethan's calm demeanor didn't waver. "I respect your opinion, but this is my personal choice. I'm not here to disturb anyone, just to take care of my business." Karen's lips pressed into a thin line. She gestured toward the nearby security guard, her frustration boiling over. "If you won't remove it, I'll have to ask security to escort you out." The guard, a young man in a crisp uniform, approached hesitantly. His uncertain expression made it clear he wasn't comfortable with the situation. The surrounding customers began to take notice, their conversations fading into murmurs as they turned their attention to the unfolding confrontation. Ethan sighed softly, glancing around at the growing audience. He turned back to Karen, his voice steady. "I don't believe I'd done anything wrong. I'm not causing a disturbance." Karen's voice rose, her frustration spilling over. "You may think that, but your actions are disrupting the environment here. I need you to leave." The murmurs among the customers grew louder. Some shook their heads, clearly uncomfortable with the scene. Others exchanged pointed looks, whispering opinions that ranged from agreement to disapproval. The tension in the room was palpable, thick enough to cut through. The security guard finally spoke, his tone apologetic but firm. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to step outside." Ethan regarded him for a moment, then nodded. "Fine," he said quietly. "I'll leave." He adjusted the strap of his bag on his shoulder and turned to exit, his head held high despite the unfair treatment. The crowd watched in silence as he walked away, the red hat still perched on his head, a quiet statement of resilience in the face of judgment. Karen stood in place, arms crossed, her expression resolute but tinged with unease. The lobby remained unusually quiet, the weight of what had just happened hanging in the air. As Ethan stepped out into the sunlight, the audience was left with a mix of emotions, a sympathy for the man who had been unfairly singled out, and curiosity about who he was and what he might do next. As Ethan stepped out of the bank into the bright afternoon sun, he paused for a moment, taking a deep breath to steady himself. The sting of the public humiliation lingered, but his resolve remained intact. He reached into his pocket, pulling out his sleek smartphone, and scrolled through his contacts until he found the name he was looking for. With a swipe, he dialed the number. "Lila?" he said calmly when the call connected. "I need you to arrange a meeting with the regional director of this bank. Make it for this afternoon if possible." On the other end, Lila's efficient voice didn't miss a beat. "Understood, Mr. Blake. I'll make the arrangements right away." Ethan hung up, his expression unreadable as he turned and walked toward his car. The MAGA hat still set firmly on his head, a silent testament to his principles. He wasn't looking for revenge. He was looking to address a much larger issue, one that went beyond a single incident. Back at the bank, Karen Whitfield was still feeling satisfied with her actions. She had enforced what she believed to be the right decision, confident that she had upheld the bank's values. What she didn't realize was that her judgment had been clouded by assumptions, and the fallout from her actions was about to catch up with her. Later that afternoon, Ethan sat in a sleek conference room on the top floor of a neighboring skyscraper, the regional headquarters for the bank. Opposite him was Martin Grayson, the regional director, a man in his late 50s with a polished demeanor and an air of authority. He greeted Ethan with a firm handshake, clearly aware of who he was dealing with. "Mr. Blake, it's an honor to meet you," Martin began, his tone courteous. "Lila informed me of your concerns, and I assure you, we take these matters very seriously." Ethan nodded, his expression calm but firm. "I appreciate that, Martin. Let me start by saying that I've been a loyal customer of this bank for many years and have also made significant investments that have supported its growth. My intention here isn't to disrupt operations, but to address a fundamental issue." Martin's brow furrowed slightly. "Of course. Please, go on." Ethan recounted the events of the morning in measured detail, his tone never rising, but carrying an unmistakable edge of disappointment. He described how Karen had approached him, how her assumptions about his MAGA hat had escalated into a public confrontation, and how security had been summoned to remove him despite his calm demeanor. By the time Ethan finished, Martin's face was a mix of shock and embarrassment. "I'm deeply sorry this happened," Martin said, his voice earnest. "This is not the level of professionalism we expect from our staff. I assure you, this will be addressed immediately." Ethan leaned back slightly, his gaze steady. "It's not just about me, Martin. This situation is a symptom of a larger problem, assumptions, biases, and a lack of understanding. I'm not asking for anyone to lose their job over this. What I want is a solution that fosters respect and tolerance." Martin nodded, clearly taking Ethan's words to heart. "We'll start with mandatory sensitivity training for all staff," he said, "and I'll personally ensure that this matter is handled appropriately." The meeting ended on a positive note, with Martin thanking Ethan for bringing the issue to his attention. But Ethan wasn't done yet. He knew that true change required more than promises, It required action. The next day, Karen Whitfield was summoned to the regional office. She walked into the conference room confidently, assuming it was a routine check-in with her superiors. But when she saw Martin sitting across from her with a serious expression, her confidence faltered. "Karen, please take a seat," Martin said, gesturing to the chair opposite him. Karen complied, her mind racing as she tried to piece together what this meeting could be about. Her unease deepened when Martin handed her a detailed account of the previous day's events, written in Ethan's precise, professional tone. "I don't understand," she said, her voice wavering. "Why am I being questioned about this? That man was causing a disturbance with his hat." Martin held up a hand to stop her. "That man," he said evenly, "is Ethan Blake. He's not only one of our most valued clients, but also one of the bank's largest investors." Karen's face drained of color. Her confident demeanor crumbled as the weight of her mistake hit her. "He's... what?" she stammered, her mind reeling. Martin's gaze was unwavering. "Mr. Blake brought this incident to my attention, not to demand your dismissal, but to address the larger issue at hand. He believes in second chances and has requested that we use this as an opportunity to improve." Karen's heart sank. The memory of Ethan's calm yet firm responses during their confrontation played back in her mind, and she felt a pang of shame. She had judged him based solely on his hat, not his actions or words. And now she realized the magnitude of her error. "What happens now?" she asked quietly, her voice laced with regret. "First," Martin said, "you will issue a formal apology to Mr. Blake. Second, you, along with the rest of the staff, will undergo mandatory sensitivity training. This isn't just about one incident, Karen. It's about ensuring we uphold the values of respect and professionalism in all interactions." Karen nodded, her shoulders slumping under the weight of her humility. "I understand," she said softly. "I'll do whatever it takes to make this right." The following day, Karen stood outside the bank, nervously clutching a letter in her hands. She had written and rewritten her apology to Ethan, struggling to find the right words to convey her remorse. When Ethan arrived, she approached him hesitantly, her usual confidence replaced by a quiet vulnerability. "Mr. Blake," she began, her voice trembling slightly, "I want to sincerely apologize for how I treated you. I was wrong to make assumptions and to escalate the situation. I deeply regret my actions." Ethan studied her for a moment, then offered a small, understanding smile. "Thank you, Karen. I appreciate your apology. We all make mistakes. It's how we learn from them that matters." Karen nodded, her gratitude evident. "I've learned a lot from this experience," she said, "and I'll do my best to ensure it doesn't happen again." Ethan extended a hand, and Karen shook it firmly, a gesture of reconciliation that symbolized the beginning of change. For Ethan, this was never about retribution. It was about fostering understanding. And for Karen, it was a humbling lesson in the dangers of assumptions and the power of forgiveness. The quiet hum of the bank returned as Ethan stepped inside for his next visit. This time, his entrance was far less disruptive. The staff acknowledged him with respectful nods, some even offering warm smiles, though a hint of nervousness lingered in the air. Ethan carried himself with the same confident composure as before, his red MAGA hat once again perched on his head, a silent emblem of personal belief and resilience. From behind the counter, Karen Whitfield watched him enter. Her usual sharp gaze was replaced with a look of apprehension. She held a small envelope in her hands, the words inside rehearsed countless times in her mind. Summoning her courage, she stepped out from behind the counter and made her way toward Ethan. "Mr. Blake," she began softly, her voice trembling slightly. Ethan turned to face her, his expression calm but curious. "Miss Whitfield," he replied, acknowledging her with a slight nod. Karen hesitated, taking a deep breath before continuing. I wanted to apologize. I was wrong in how I treated you during your last visit. I let my assumptions guide my actions and I judged you unfairly. I regret how I handled the situation and I'm truly sorry for the way I made you feel. Her sincerity was evident, her words carrying the weight of genuine remorse. Ethan studied her for a moment, then offered a small, reassuring smile. "Apology accepted," he said kindly. "It takes courage to admit when we're wrong, and I appreciate your willingness to do so." Karen exhaled in relief, the tension in her shoulders easing slightly. "Thank you. I've had a lot of time to reflect on what happened, and I've realized how much harm assumptions can cause. I hope to learn from this and do better moving forward." Ethan nodded. "That's all anyone can do, learn and grow. For what it's worth, I don't wear this hat to provoke or offend. For me, it's a symbol of personal resilience and belief in the values that have shaped my journey. It's never been about hate." Karen's eyes softened as she listened, her perspective beginning to shift. "I see that now," she said quietly. "And I'm sorry for not taking the time to understand that before." Ethan extended his hand and Karen shook it firmly, the gesture cementing their reconciliation. As part of the resolution, the bank had begun implementing changes. Inclusivity training became mandatory for all employees, focusing on empathy, understanding, and fostering a respectful environment. Ethan himself contributed resources, sharing insights from his own experiences as a leader who valued diversity of thought and mutual respect. The transformation within the bank was palpable. Staff members approached their roles with renewed sensitivity, engaging with customers and each other in ways that fostered trust and openness. The once tense atmosphere became welcoming, a space where differences were acknowledged and embraced rather than judged. One afternoon, Ethan found himself seated across from a young entrepreneur who had come to the bank seeking advice. The man was nervous, clutching a folder of business plans and financial projections. Ethan listened intently, offering thoughtful feedback and words of encouragement. His ability to inspire and uplift was evident in the young man's growing confidence as they spoke. Karen watched the interaction from a distance, her heart filled with a mix of admiration and introspection. She thought back to her first encounter with Ethan, the assumptions she had made, and the lessons she had learned since. The man she had misjudged had shown her the importance of looking beyond surface appearances and valuing the humanity in everyone. The bank had become a better place, not just for its customers, but for its employees as well. Karen herself had grown, her understanding deepened by the experience. She no longer saw the world in rigid black and white terms, but with the nuance and complexity it deserved. As Ethan finished his meeting with the young entrepreneur, he caught Karen's gaze and gave her a small, knowing nod. She returned the gesture, a silent acknowledgement of the journey they had both taken. The bank's transformation stood as a testament to the power of understanding, forgiveness, and the willingness to change. And as Ethan walked out that day, the bright red hat on his head no longer drew judgment, but a quiet respect for the man who had taught them all a lesson in grace and humility. The emotional depth of the story lies in its ability to connect with viewers on multiple levels, fostering empathy, redemption, and inspiration. Ethan's calm composure during a deeply unfair confrontation draws immediate sympathy. His refusal to retaliate, despite being publicly humiliated, showcases strength and dignity that viewers can admire. Many will see themselves in Ethan, having faced situations where they were judged or misunderstood, and his resilience serves as a powerful example of maintaining grace under pressure. Karen's transformation provides a redemptive arc that is equally compelling. Her initial judgment, driven by assumptions, mirrors a flaw many have experienced or witnessed. As she confronts her own biases, learns from her mistakes, and takes steps toward understanding, her story resonates with anyone who has had to reevaluate their beliefs and grow from past errors. It's a journey of humility and self-awareness that strikes a chord with audiences. Ethan's response to the conflict elevates the story's emotional appeal. Rather than seeking revenge, he chooses to turn a personal affront into an opportunity for cultural improvement. His decision to forgive Karen and advocate for inclusivity training reflects a commitment to fostering understanding and respect, even in the face of adversity. This act of leadership and kindness inspires viewers, leaving them with a sense of hope and empowerment to address their own conflicts with grace and compassion. Ultimately, the story's emotional appeal lies in its humanity. It captures the complexity of judgment, the possibility of redemption, and the transformative power of understanding, leaving viewers with a message that transcends the specifics of the situation and resonates universally. Ethan Blake entered the bank with a sense of purpose, his red MAGA hat perched firmly on his head, drawing a few curious glances from nearby customers. The lobby was bustling with activity, the hum of conversations and the click of polished shoes filling the air. Ethan exuded calm confidence, his casual demeanor contrasting sharply with the polished corporate atmosphere of the bank. For him, the hat was more than just an accessory. It symbolized his personal beliefs, a quiet testament to resilience and freedom. Karen Whitfield, the bank's manager, spotted Ethan almost immediately. Her sharp eyes zeroed in on the bright red hat, and a flicker of disapproval crossed her face. Karen was known for her meticulous attention to detail and her firm stance on professionalism. To her, the hat represented division, and she couldn't understand why anyone would wear it so openly in a place like this. Karen murmured to a nearby staff member, her tone laced with irritation. "Who does he think he is, walking in here with that thing? It's offensive." Determined to address what she saw as a breach of decorum, Karen made her way toward Ethan, her heels clicking sharply against the tiled floor. Ethan was mid-conversation with a teller when Karen interrupted, her voice firm but tinged with condescension. "Excuse me, sir," she began, crossing her arms. "I need to ask you to remove your hat. This is a professional establishment, and that kind of attire is inappropriate here." Ethan turned to face her, his expression calm and unflustered. "I'm sorry, but I don't believe my hat is causing any disturbance. It's just a statement of my personal beliefs." Karen's demeanor stiffened. "It's not about your beliefs. It's about maintaining a respectful environment for all our clients. That hat is divisive." Ethan met her gaze steadily, his voice measured. "I appreciate your concern, but I'm here to conduct my business, just like everyone else. My hat shouldn't impact anyone else's ability to do the same." Their exchange drew the attention of nearby customers, whispers rippling through the crowd. Karen, growing increasingly flustered, signaled for security. Within moments, 2 uniformed guards approached, their expressions neutral but alert. "Sir," one of them said politely, "we're going to have to ask you to step outside." Ethan sighed, his disappointment evident, but his composure unwavering. He gathered his documents and walked toward the exit, his hat still firmly in place. The tension in the room lingered as Karen watched him leave, her sense of authority intact, but her actions sparking quiet unease among the onlookers. Outside the bank, Ethan pulled out his phone and made a call. "Lila, I need you to arrange a meeting with the regional director. This is something that needs to be addressed." That afternoon, Ethan sat across from Martin Grayson, the bank's regional director. Martin listened intently as Ethan recounted the incident, his expression shifting from concern to embarrassment. "Mr. Blake," Martin said, "on behalf of the bank, I want to apologize for what happened. This is not how we treat our customers, especially someone of your standing." Ethan shook his head. "It's not about my standing, Martin. It's about ensuring respect for everyone who walks through those doors. What happened today reflects a much deeper issue that needs addressing." Martin nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. "We'll take immediate action. Sensitivity training for all staff. A review of our policies, whatever it takes to ensure this doesn't happen again." The following day, Karen was summoned to the regional office. She walked into the conference room with her usual confidence, but her composure faltered when she saw Martin's serious expression. "Karen," Martin began, sliding a detailed report across the table, "we need to talk about yesterday's incident." As Karen read through the account, her face paled. "Mr. Blake is an investor?" she stammered, the realization hitting her like a wave. Martin's tone softened, but his words were firm. "Ethan Blake isn't just an investor. He's also a person who deserves respect, regardless of his hat or his beliefs. We can't allow personal biases to dictate how we treat our clients." Karen's voice wavered. "I didn't mean to offend anyone. I thought I was doing what was best for the bank." Martin leaned forward. "Intentions aside, it's clear that assumptions were made and they led to an unfair outcome. Mr. Blake has requested sensitivity training for the entire staff, and he's willing to forgive and move forward if we take this as an opportunity to grow." Karen nodded, humbled. "I understand. I'll do whatever it takes to make this right." The next morning, Karen approached Ethan during his visit to the bank. Her usual brisk demeanor was replaced with genuine humility. "Mr. Blake," she said quietly, "I want to sincerely apologize for how I treated you. I made assumptions, and I acted out of bias. I deeply regret my actions." Ethan studied her for a moment before offering a small smile. "Apology accepted. We all have things to learn. What matters is how we move forward." As part of the changes, the bank implemented inclusivity training, fostering a culture of empathy and understanding. Karen embraced the opportunity to grow, becoming an advocate for respect and professionalism. The transformation within the bank was evident, creating a welcoming environment for clients and staff alike. One afternoon, Ethan sat with the young entrepreneur at the bank, offering advice and encouragement. Karen watched from a distance, reflecting on how much she had learned. The man she had misjudged had not only forgiven her, but had also inspired change that would benefit countless others. The story ended on a hopeful note, a testament to the power of understanding, second chances, and the courage to challenge assumptions. Comments below where you're watching from, and if you like and love our story, kindly subscribe our channel. Life, inspirational, and motivational tales that explore themes of love, unity, and patriotism. Stay with us always for interesting stories.